Hello and welcome to the Blockade Runner podcast number 78. This is John, and joining me tonight is Ryan.
Hello.
And guess what? Star Wars Resistance debuted this weekend on Disney Channel and for us on the Disney Now app, which is where we watched it. And we are going to talk about the first 3 episodes of Star Wars Resistance tonight. The first one aired on television. But the first 3 episodes are up on up on Disney Now. So Ryan and I actually both checked out all 3 of the episodes that are posted now, and we're gonna talk about all of them a little bit. I feel like maybe we'll focus mainly on the recruit, or maybe not mainly, but that's like the introduction to the whole show, and then the other 2 episodes are more kind of standard. What I'm assuming will be standard episodes, but. If you have not watched Star Wars Resistance at all yet, I guess up to you if you want to listen further or maybe come back and check the show out after you've seen those episodes. I was thinking about this, Ryan, and I feel like it's not these episodes early on here are pretty low stakes, and it's a lot of exposition and introduction to different characters and things like that. So I sort of feel like it's not really spoilery kind of territory. You know what I mean? You can listen to a conversation about these episodes before or after you watch them, and it wouldn't make that big of a difference. But
I mean, aside from Kaz dying in the second episode,
yeah, that was sad. No, it's obviously your call, listener or viewer, if you want to hear about these episodes before you see them. But I feel like most people could probably access them on the Disney Now app one way or another. Although I did have a little trouble with that. No, they say that. So
I mean, I don't think it's up in all regions. I don't think the Disney Now app is accessible in certain regions, and if you don't have cable.
Yeah, actually, that's a great point, because I don't think it airs until this weekend in the UK, and I'm not sure when Australia and other parts of the world are getting it. We have at least a few listeners from those areas. So maybe we're jumping the gun for you, but hold on to this one. Hold on to this episode in your podcast catcher of choice, and maybe come back to it then. Or like I said, if you're not super invested or maybe not ultra psyched about Resistance, I feel like these are, again, there's no big reveals or huge moments where they're going to be spoiled from us talking about them. I don't think so.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, let's jump into it. We talked about our anticipation and our hopes for the show and stuff over the last couple months. In our most recent episode, we talked a little bit about it when those sweet looking toys were revealed. So, we kind of both said our piece, but why don't we just say, like, before we dig in further, kind of where we landed on it. Where did you land on the show, Ryan? How do you feel about it after watching a couple episodes?
I'd say, like, now that we're 3 episodes in and I have a feel for what the show is going to be, I think it's going to be pretty fun. I think that's kind of the key word here. This is not... I don't think this show will end up being as high stakes as something like Rebels. But I think just the general vibe of the show, and I put it in our show notes as Star Wars Episode 7 Racer, which I feel like is pretty appropriate. It does feel like we got the pod race scene in episode 1, and then there were a couple video games that kind of expanded on the pod race like scene, like and what it was kind of in the sport and what it was all about, and how there were like these characters and these rivalries and stuff. I feel like this is going to be somewhere between like episode 1 Racer for Nintendo 64 and Rebels. like it's gonna kind of land there. I mean, just going by these first 3 episodes, like who knows? Like there is potential for it to get higher stakes and more dark the closer we get to Force Awakens in the timeline. This is set like what, 6 months before Force Awakens?
Yeah, I think 6 months. Yep.
So it could go there, and that would be interesting because things are so light right now within the context of the show. But I'm kind of okay with it either way. Like I don't think I will be disappointed if it doesn't like, go that deep into like the atrocities of the First Order. And if it just kind of sticks to like there's this competitive racing scene on this carrier, and I mean, I guess we'll talk more about this when we talk about the potential for the show, but just like what it is right now in these first 3 episodes, like I'm pretty okay with. It's not like the most like, oh my God, I can't stop thinking about it, like Last Jedi type stuff when it comes to Star Wars, but I think it will be, like I had fun with these first 3 episodes, and I think it will be consistently fun going forward. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think about on the same page as you. I really didn't expect anything beyond that, and actually, I guess I'd say I feel like it feels in tone and style a little closer to Rebels than I thought it would, which I think is a good thing, because I thought it would really. And it is, but I thought it would be really targeted towards 7-year-olds, and I thought that meant that it would feel pretty different from the last 2 Star Wars animated shows, and in a lot of ways it does, but there are some similarities there. It was coming back from commercial break, and the music was swelling, and there was like this beautiful visual, and there was a dogfight in the opening of the first episode out in space, and there's just and there was that pirate attack in the second episode. It's really fun, and there's certain elements of it where I feel like, wow, I can really see where this is aimed towards younger kids, and I feel like the plots of most of the episodes will be kind of lower stakes, like you said, lighter fare. But I have no issue with that. I'm living for going to the comic book store every week this month and buying a comic that is targeted towards 8-year-olds, and I'm more excited about that than I am the comics coming out from Marvel each week. I just, to me, the fact that it is skewing towards young viewers and clearly targeting that age group, if I know that going in, and I know it's going to be sort of light and simple storytelling for the most part, that doesn't really, I can enjoy that quite a bit. And so, yeah, there was nothing about these episodes I didn't like. To be honest, I really liked everything about them. And like you said, it's not going to be the kind of Star Wars storytelling, at least so far. It doesn't seem like it'll be the kind of Star Wars storytelling that's going to really stick with me and have my mind racing and I'm going to be digging into the symbolism and things like that. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to have a great time with the show. So yeah, I feel like we're right on the same page there for the most part. So.
A blind spot I have in Star Wars is another animated series, the Lego Star Wars, the Freemaker Adventures.
Yeah.
Which I also believe is aimed at like 6 to 10-year-old demographic. Like that, it seems to be something that is aiming towards the same demographic, and I feel like that would potentially be a better like comparison point, but I haven't actually seen any of that.
Yeah, I've seen a handful of episodes of that show.
Okay.
And that's a great thing to bring up. Actually, I hadn't thought about that at all. That's a great thing to bring up because to me, watching that show, it's much more clear like, hey, this is a separate thing from something like Rebels or Clone Wars. It's really silly. Lots of like kind of slapsticky humor, and I don't want to talk down about that show either because the episodes I watched, I liked them better than I thought I would because I like the Lego Star Wars games, but beyond that, it just didn't. It's not something I was interested in as
You're
a way
not
of,
a huge Lego guy.
I'm not a huge Lego guy, but also that kind of humor. Like I've never watched the Robot Chicken Star Wars specials. I've never watched the Family Guy the Family Guy Star Wars specials. And I'm not saying that like Lego Star Wars comedy and humor is the same as those sorts of things, but when it comes to taking Star Wars and like, hey, we're gonna make a comedy sort of show, like a spoofy kind of comedy kind of thing. That's just not something I'm interested in. And again, Lego Star Wars is not quite the same as that stuff, but it's not something that really appeals to me. Yeah,
it's
similar.
Silly. Yeah. Extremely
silly. Silly. Yeah. Yes. So anyway, watching Resistance, it's not like that. It's not being goofy for the sake of being goofy, in terms of goofing on Star Wars, I guess I should say. It's light, it's humorous. There are points when you see Kaz like going like through the air, like, and falling. I mean, it's funny.
Oh, yeah.
It's funny, and it's definitely lighthearted, but it's Star Wars. They are making Star Wars. They're not making something that is riffing on Star Wars. And I feel like Lego Star Wars is a little closer. Even the Freemaker Adventures, which again, all credits to them. What I watched, I thought was definitely beyond my expectations. I thought they did a good job with it, and that was their intent. That was their purpose. They wanted to make something that was more in that direction. That was the goal. So that's great, but this is not that. It's not trying to be something other than Star Wars storytelling. It's just a more of a lighthearted, aged down version of it. But
yeah, you know what it kind of, I think, even reminds me more so of, now that I'm thinking about it, like the vibe of it, because the vibe is different than Rebels or Clone Wars. It kind of reminds me more of Forces of Destiny, in that like it's a very colorful, like there's going to be some adventure, like maybe not adventure, but some like action. There's going to be like some banter. It's, you kind of know things are going to work out. I don't know, like it is, but I think it has like shades of all this different Star Wars animation, but it really is kind of its own thing. And I think like there's this rush, and obviously we are doing it right now, to compare it to something that came before, but really it's both an amalgamation of so much different stuff. It also feels, again, extremely like a video game in both the way it looks and the general premise and everything around it, and the characters and the archetypes and everything. But it also has like these shades of other Star Wars animation. It's interesting.
Yeah, I think that there's like a spectrum, like Clone Wars is definitely all the way on one side, and then Forces of Destiny would be all the way on the other side, in terms of that one being the most light and sort of, I don't want to say inconsequential, because some of those Forces of Destiny, shorts do kind of address like moments from the saga that we had wondered about and hadn't seen and stuff, but it just feels like they're trying to, like a slice of life, like a moment in the life of these characters, more so than like, hey, let's advance the plot of something, or let's really do something consequential. It's just like, hey, if you ever wanted to know what happened in those 15 minutes of Jyn Erso's life, like here it is, versus we're going to really kind of have an arc, and you know what I'm saying? So anyways, that's all the way on the other side. Clone Wars is like sometimes super heavy, pretty violent, pretty dark, pretty, weighty, and that sort of thing. And then I think Rebels is a step removed from that, from Clone Wars, and then this is definitely, it seems so far, a step removed from Rebels in terms of making things a little lighter, less heaviness, etc. It's aged down a little bit, but I still though am just a little surprised at how much it did feel. I don't know. There's something about the storytelling and just the way the show comes across that reminded me more of Rebels and Clone Wars than I thought it would. It definitely feels like the little sibling of those shows, I think, more so than a separate thing from them, at least so far to me. So, which is cool. So, well, let's talk about the plot of the show a little bit, and kind of go from there. I mean, we've started to address those things, but, our first episode here, the recruit, were introduced. Well, first off, I love the opening of the recruit. It doesn't start off on this space station; it starts off in space. We've got Kaz in an X-wing, actually in a New Republic X-wing, which is really cool. And that's an example of like, hey, there is going to be some stuff in this show that's like of consequence and really interesting.
Yeah.
As far as the Star Wars site and the episode guide and stuff goes, it seems that we've never actually seen like the New Republic insignia on a uniform or anything like that before. I don't think we've ever seen a New Republic X-wing or pilot before. That's pretty cool. Like you're seeing brand new Star Wars stuff in the opening shots of this show. So
yeah, and it's interesting just to like even to hang on that for a moment and think about like how like what the New Republic is and how it is this like demilitarized organization of more akin to like a United Nations type of group, and like and that shows in like that New Republic X-wing, which is like white and blue, like it's meant to be like colorful and like I guess those are like friendly colors maybe. In a way, like, but also at the same time they're also like police colors, in a way, and that like I think that right there like tells a lot about you know what we're stepping into, and any like, and I mean we'll get into this later because it's one of the highlights of it for me is like any glimpses we're seeing at this new era, you know, post Return of the Jedi, and like that time between Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens, I think is like, it's super fascinating. I loved it in the Aftermath books. I loved it in the Shattered Empire comics miniseries, like, and getting more of that is just, it's going to be really cool because there's so many unanswered questions and so many things that we didn't even know we had questions about.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I yeah, absolutely. And shortly after the pilot episode, the recruit starts, we see Poe and Leia in some kind of meeting, strategizing or something like that, talking about confidential things that Kaz isn't supposed to hear, and so we don't hear because he's our kind of point of view character. But I mean, that right there, that's tantalizing. You know, the idea that we could get more of that sort of more scenes between Poe. We will get more scenes between Poe and Leia, and no sort of like more about what they were thinking and what the status of the resistance was right before Force Awakens, and you know, some of the material that's come out, interviews and episode guides and stuff since the show debuted has indicated that it will cross over with the Force Awakens. These timelines will cross over. I wonder even if that'll happen in the first season, you know, because I don't know that they're necessarily working on the second season already. If they're following a timeline like Clone Wars and Rebels and stuff, I guess they probably are, because I think I know for sure Clone Wars was already like 2 seasons in production wise before the first episode aired. So they could be working on a second season already, and maybe they know that. But anyway, it's going to happen. We're going to see the Force Awakens that period of time. And so even just knowing that, I mean, it feels like there's the potential for some heavier stakes and things to sort of be brought into the show. I think still in a more lighthearted way, but yeah, there's opportunities to see some really cool stuff. And we're already starting to see that right away.
Yeah, I also think like one of my favorite parts about the Aftermath trilogy is just how like the like common people react, like how they feel about both the Galactic Civil War and both about like these rumblings of this First Order, you know, out in the deep space. What is it called? The
wild space, or no? Oh my goodness. I read this all the time. I hear it all the time.
Outer regions. No.
Unknown regions.
Unknown regions. There we go. Yeah, like how, because we do have like, another thing I think is really cool about this show is we have just these like common people who are on this like weird like racing aircraft carrier drilling platform. I have no idea what the Colossus really even is.
Right.
And like why anyone would want to like go there and live. But whatever. But anyways, these people live there, and they also like, it's almost like in a way they're like living this I don't know, like detached existence because they are in this like private island essentially, that is separate from everything that has gone on. And like, as we know, like some of the characters went there post Galactic Civil War, and because they don't want to be a part of like what's going on like planet side. But I don't know, like I think there's, again, like it's all coming down to potential, and I know that's like our last bullet point here, but I keep just like everything is just tied to the potential of this show to tell the stories of these people who are essentially living out Finn's early dream, which is just to escape from the conflict. Wow. Like what happens to these people who are living that when the war comes home, essentially. Like that, I think there's like so much potential for like really cool storytelling there.
That's really cool. Yeah. That's exciting to think about it in those terms. I like that. For sure. And I think it's really interesting that it's on the edge of the unknown regions, and that the First Order we know have collected and sort of grown out there in the unknown regions. Like it's maybe a bridge, it's a bridge between sort of what we're seeing in the sequel trilogy and that whole kind of thing, the unknown regions, all that stuff. I'm really excited to learn more about that. And it just feels like it's a really different setting for Star Wars for sure. And it feels like it's not just retreading, it's set on Tatooine, or it's set on Coruscant, or a planet, even if it was a new planet, but a planet that's in like one of those same systems and has a similar biosphere. Just all that stuff. It just feels like it's really like this is a kind of Star Wars story that we haven't seen a lot of, if any. So I think that's really fun. As far as the story goes, like after Kaz, I want to say real quick that space battle, I thought it was a really cool way to open the show, but also it right away, I think that kind of tells you something too, because it was really kind of slow moving for a Star Wars space battle. I felt like it sort of felt like the ships were just like hovering there in space at times, and
literally at one point.
It didn't have the kind of like intensity.
There's no like kinetic energy.
Yeah, it didn't have that like a Star Wars space battle generally would.
Intense.
Yep. So and again, I still enjoyed it, but it's definitely different in that regard. So anyway, so after that, Kaz, he's rescued by Poe, and Poe's impressed by Kaz and offers them a chance to join the Resistance, which he does, and gives him this mission to be posted up here at the Colossus, and sets him up with, we meet all these different, primary characters in this first episode. Sets him up with Jaeger, who seems like he's going to be kind of his mentor figure. Although I think there's potential with Jaeger, we'll see. But sets him up with him and then basically introduces us to the whole racing thing on Colossus as well. And that first episode kind of culminates with this big race between Kaz and Tora Doza. And it's that episode is 45 minutes long. It's a double episode. It's our pilot, and we meet so many characters. I feel like it was just all about setting everything up, obviously, as you'd expect an initial episode to be. But I thought it was fun. I thought they did a really good job of introducing a lot of different characters and kind of just getting us right into this whole, Colossus racing scene and all that stuff. So, again, the stakes of this pilot episode, they're not huge. It's just like, can he win this race? I guess, can he survive the race? So that's good.
Yeah.
But it was really fun, I thought.
Yeah, it's so funny how it's like how it does start with this like space battle. It's like here's the Star Wars you want, here's like the Star Wars you expect. And then it's like, okay, enough of that. Now here's like the real story. And then it like digs in. Then you like, when you get on the Colossus is kind of like really where the show starts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I think it makes a lot of sense because it's like, well, we want to have I'm going to overuse this phrase to death, but we want a lighter, more low stakes, Star Wars show. But there's got to be, kind of, we got to have the conflict in there in some way, and we want there to be, some importance to what's going on. And so I think for Kaz to be someone who's given this kind of important mission, but he's got to be a spy. He's got to lay low. So it's like he can do all these sort of everyday things and be around all these everyday people, but there's still that thread of this is connected to that larger storytelling and that larger conflict and stuff. I think it really works. The other thing I think is really interesting about Kaz too, which I was kind of thinking about as I was reading through the episode guide and stuff like that. Kaz is from Hosnian Prime, and his father is a senator. And, I think that's cool because in the sequel trilogy so far, we know about the Resistance. We know about the First Order. We're introduced to characters from that world, from this fringe radical group. But we don't see a lot of the actual government, the New Republic, while it still exists in The Force Awakens, I guess. But we don't really get much of that world at all. So it's kind of interesting that he has a link to and sort of acts as a link to, that world. And he has to sort of rebel against his parents, even just to be part of the Resistance, because that's not what he's supposed to do and where they want him to be and all that. I think that's pretty interesting. I like that.
Yeah. And I mean, that's interesting. I actually didn't know that. I knew like his dad was part of the Republic, but I hadn't really put the pieces together, like that he was like stationed on Hosnian Prime.
Well, I think he's from Hosnian Prime. I believe that's his home planet, Kaz.
Okay.
I'm trying to see where it's in the databank or the episode guide or something. Somewhere it's in there. I'm pretty sure. Definitely positive I read that. I just don't
okay.
So,
yeah.
If I'm wrong, I apologize, but I'm 99% sure he's from Hosnian Prime.
Yeah, and I mean that could definitely be a tonal shift for the show if if this does cross over with Force Awakens and Hosnian Prime is destroyed.
Yeah.
With Kaz's father on it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that whole world is basically going to be snuffed out. When Starkiller Base fires on it, and we saw Starkiller Base even in the first episode, which was great. Was really cool to see an animated version of Starkiller Base. I mean, it didn't do anything; it just hovered there, but it floated there in space. But it was cool. It was just cool to see it.
Yeah,
that's an immediate visual link back to The Force Awakens, and a reminder that hey, this is part of this larger conflict. So. I really like that, but yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know how they'll avoid. It's weird because I feel like the show is definitely more targeted towards younger kids, and they're trying to avoid heavier storylines and stuff. But at the same time, we know it's going to cross over with Force Awakens. We're seeing Starkiller Base already, and I mean, sorry, there's going to be like a massive genocide that's going to take place during the storytelling of this show. So I feel like that'll be addressed in some way. So
yeah. Yeah, and it's so interesting because you watch the first 3 episodes and you're like, there's Poe Dameron, there's BB-8, there's Starkiller Base. Like, yeah, this is definitely this time period. But then the stuff that's actually happening is really just about as like making friends and learning how to be a mechanic and stuff, and like maybe a racer. Like there's like, I don't know, it's interesting. And like that's what I was saying, like I'm like, I mean, I want that like deeper connection to the sequel trilogy and all of that, but like also like I found myself like surprisingly okay with just like what the what the story was. And again, it's something I've brought up multiple times on this podcast, is one of my favorite duologies of Star Wars books is the MedStar books, which is just basically the just like a hospital essentially, like in the story of like those characters there, and it like ties into like the greater I guess it was Clone Wars, and like that, like prequel trilogy, like conflict and everything. But it really was just about like people on the ground, just like in a central location, taking care of, like just doing their jobs in this like bigger picture. And I think those kind of stories are like really, really cool in Star Wars, when we know there are these like literally like galactic stakes that are happening. But I think like the smaller stories are cool, but then it's also cool when they do, link to the bigger story. And
yeah, and part of me, I'm looking at this cast list and I'm wondering, all of these people are, or most of these characters are pilots. They've already in the second episode fended off an attack from pirates.
Yeah,
so we know that they can.
Yeah, that's also a thing that's happening here.
Yeah. But we know they can handle themselves and they can fight back and all that stuff. And I'm wondering, like, if this whole Colossus racing, all that sort of thing is really season 1, and by season 2, they're all going to be flying in the Resistance or something. And I'm not saying I want that. I don't know that I necessarily do want that, because I kind of love the idea of it just being a show about these people on this station and racing, and
Yeah.
But I wonder, like, it that really feels like it could be a first season thing where, we follow 20 episodes, 22 episodes of racing and that sort of stuff. And then, by the end of that, it's changing directions in some way, especially with them talking about how it's going to overlap with The Force Awakens and all that sort of stuff. I mean, I can't imagine after the destruction of Hosnian Prime and Starkiller Base, being used and all that they're just like, whoa, that sucked. Also, who's going to win the race next week? Like it feels like if they're racing towards, not to use a bad pun or whatever, but if they're racing towards that timeline and those events, it's hard to think that it would go back to after that just being like about cool race ships and races, and you know what I mean. I don't know. I'm really curious, and I think I'm just like really open to whatever they're going to do with it. I'm just curious to see what it's going to be. I don't know that I have like a preference necessarily for what I want it to be.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same place, because I think with Rebels, there was a whole lot of me being like, oh, I hope they don't do this. I hope they don't go there. Oh, yep, they're going there.
Yeah.
Wow, they're going there, and they're going past there. Okay. And like where like there was a show I desperately wanted Rebels to be. And it was that for a little while, and then it stopped being that and became something else. And that was like disappointing to me. But like with this, like I'm okay with it being small scale, and like I want to know about Bo Keevil and like these pilots and their like super cool looking ships that I want toys of and I want a video game of. But then like at the same time, like if they end up becoming like a resistance squadron, like a black squadron or something, like that is also super cool. And they like, you know, I don't know, they meet Ray or something, like whatever.
Well, we'll get to that kind of thing when we talk about the potential of the show a little further. But yeah, no, I agree. And you know, you brought up Rebels. I love Rebels. I really loved season 1 of Rebels. I loved it so much. It's some of my favorite stuff. I loved it. But I felt like in seasons 2, 3, and 4, it really expanded in a lot of different ways and became a lot of different things. And that sort of tight focus of season 1 is what I love the most. But with this show, I feel like, you know, we've only seen 3 episodes. I still really don't know what it is going to be or what it's going to kind of want to be. And I guess I wouldn't have known that so much with Rebels after only 3 episodes either. But I thought season 1 of Rebels, and I've said this before, but I thought season 1 of Rebels was just so perfectly focused on this family of the Ghost crew and, you know, why they mattered to each other and what they could do to help each other and their goal of, you know, protecting Lothal and fighting back against the Empire there on Lothal. And then I thought in seasons 2, 3, and 4, there were still great episodes and there was great stuff, but I also thought it tried to be too many different things and tried too much to be a bigger story than it started out as. So I don't want that to happen with this show. But in the same way, this is sort of like right now it's like, hey, these people live on the Colossus and let's kind of, you know, follow them on some fun, sort of lighthearted, you know, adventures and stuff. I feel like that could happen in a different location too. Like the show, as long as it doesn't try to become something too important and too serious and too weighty and stuff, like I wouldn't necessarily mind it if the focus of the plots changed, as long as like it remained a sort of a similar thing in terms of, you know what I mean? Like the kinds of stories it's telling. I think it could do that in a different location or even, you know, with a different sort of focus.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's early to be talking about that kind of stuff, I guess.
I know.
Yeah.
And that's what I think we just keep going back to the potential. And I think that's, I mean, like it's an enjoyable show to watch. I think a lot of my concerns with like the production values and the animation stuff, I think they were pretty much alleviated after just settling into it. I don't think it's like the best looking animated show, and I still think like I still stand by my belief that the Star Wars animated show should be the best looking animated show on TV. But it's not that, but I'm okay with it. Ultimately, I still think the art design is great, and I think the character designs are really, really great. So like I enjoy watching the show, but like I'm also just like insanely excited about like where it could go and what it could be. And it like, again, like I think it's, if this show ends up going for 3 seasons or 4 seasons or whatever, and it all takes place on the Colossus, and every season ends with them all like sitting around Aunt Z's tavern, like I'm like totally cool with that. But if it does become like this bigger, like, well, this is happening at our doorstep, this is affecting us personally, we need to, you know, we need to like cut this racing crap and go, you know, do something, be part of something bigger. Then I like, that's cool too. And I get, it is called Resistance, so you think there'd be some resisting at some point.
Yeah, right. Like it's not called Star Wars, like check out these cool race ships flying through rings. You know, it's called Star Wars Resistance, which is like the name of the military institution and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, so it does seem like it should. And you know, we know the First Order is going to factor into the show too, and we've seen hints of that so far. We've seen a couple scenes with First Order characters, and they're continually brought up, but it seems like that'll expand as the show goes on too. Let's just talk about, like, we're going out of order here as far as our notes go, but this has been pretty, you know, we're just kind of following the conversation anyway, so that's okay. Let's just talk about the visuals real quick while, you know, you've brought that up instead of trying to come back to it later. It sounds like, well, let me tell you what I think about it, which is pretty much, you know, how I felt initially, based on the trailers and stuff too. But I think it's gorgeous looking in terms of the aesthetic, like the design, not just the character design, but the environments and the color palette, and just the whole visual approach, the style of the art, all of that stuff. I think it's gorgeous. I love it. And there were some shots, especially in the first episode, The Recruit, but throughout, where I thought it was genuinely just beautiful. I loved it. You know, there was a shot when they were standing out on the, you know, I don't know what you call it, like the deck or whatever of the Colossus, and it was like twilight, like dusk time, and the colors were really, you know, really popped, and I thought were really really impressive. And there were some cool kind of establishing shots too. There was a point where Kaz had to like walk around through some marketplace or whatever, and there was this like overhead shot, and you saw the flags and stuff. I don't know. I think it looks really, really great. There's definitely the animation issue, which, you know, you've brought up, and that's separate from the look. You know, the still look of it, the animated thing, and you know, I can definitely see where you're coming from with that. But every once in a while I'd kind of notice it, but for the most part, I really didn't notice it that much. So it sounds like it didn't distract you too much either. Like, it wasn't overly distracting for you, the quality of the animation.
No, but like, you do notice it sometimes. There's sometimes like you times where it's like, wow, there's like like not many frames of animation in this like sequence, or like a facial expression or something, or someone will just be like staring dead-eyed for a while, and it's like almost like a video game cutscene for like a second, and you're like,
yeah,
and then like it's fine.
I feel like I notice it the most with the dialogue, like the movement of the faces and the mouths and stuff. Like, it's, you know, I can notice it there probably the most, and other little moments and stuff too. But you know, like there's a scene in, I think, Fuel for the Fire, where Kaz is kind of like crouching and sort of like crawling around on the floor, and you know, I just remember feeling like, yeah, that looks pretty cartoony and not like super fluid in terms of you know, the animation and stuff. But for me, that's a pretty minor complaint. It doesn't really distract me too much. So, but are you similarly impressed with like the colors and the design? And
yeah,
did you feel too that there were some like genuinely like just pretty gorgeous shots and pretty impressive? Like,
yeah, I think I like you noticed them a lot in like the establishing shots, and I think also the character designs, I think, are great. Like, these are some like really distinct looking characters.
Yep.
And I think the racer ship designs also are just like super, super cool. They remind me of like just like an N64 racing game or something. Like, and that could be Star Wars Episode 1 Racer, but also like all of those like Wipeout inspired F-Zero type games. Like, they look straight out of that.
Yeah, and like I said on our last episode, or whenever the last time we talked about this is or was, I'm not as familiar with, you know, the anime stuff as you are, but I feel like that's one of the places where I really noticed that anime influence too, is in those ships, and just, you know, the look of the ships and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm definitely into that as well. Let's talk about the characters a little bit. We have are you looking at the data bank on Star Wars? Okay. So our top row here, and we'll link to this, of course, in the show notes, but our top row has our kind of like primary characters. I don't think we want to necessarily go through them one by one or anything like that. We can, you know, we'll be talking about them all season long and beyond probably. But let's get this one out of the way. What do you think about Kaz? Because I feel like he's going to be the one that's going to bother some people.
he's not for me.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the character that like me as like a man in his late 30s is
Yeah.
supposed to identify with.
Uh-huh.
He's like a goofy klutz. He's the like he's a klutz, but he also has that like that determination. Like he's just your like archetypal boys TV show main character. Like
Yeah.
he's Ash Ketchum. He's Ezra Bridger. Like
Mm-hmm.
he's
Yeah.
exactly that. And he's my least favorite part.
Yeah, I would probably agree with that. But I know a lot of people hated Ezra. I never hated Ezra. I kind of liked Ezra sometimes. In fact, some of the moments in Rebels that made me most emotional were related to Ezra. I could, and I think Kaz is exactly the same, because I can see where in there's plenty of moments where it might just feel like in the moment to moment expressions and actions of the characters, like, oh, he's being kind of annoying, you know what I mean? But I think if like when I zoom out and think about who this character is and what he means to the show and stuff like that, it's like, well, he's a good-hearted character, best intentions, in the end does well, but can kind of annoy you on the way there. That's kind of how I feel about him. So I have a lot of patience for characters like that. I think like I had a lot of patience for Ezra, and so he doesn't bother me, but I certainly see where the frustration would come in for a lot of people, and I definitely think he'll be polarizing, and a lot of people probably won't be a huge fan of Kaz, which is fine.
And the thing is, like, there's another character in like Star Wars that is also cut from that same mold, and it's basically A New Hope Luke Skywalker.
Yeah, right.
Like exactly. That's where all this comes from. Like, and people tend to forget that, but like there's not a huge difference between like season 1 Ezra Bridger and the first half of A New Hope Luke Skywalker. Like,
no, absolutely. I think the difference with Ezra though is that like by season 4 there'd be some episodes where he felt like Return of the Jedi Luke Skywalker, but then they'd go right back to him being A New Hope Luke Skywalker.
That's true.
And he matured, but not permanently. He would mature and then
regress.
Exactly. Yeah. And Kaz seems like, I mean, we're early, but I feel like Kaz is always to a certain extent going to be this, A New Hope era Luke Skywalker. But Ezra had a lot more potential, I think, to mature and become a more serious character than Kaz seems to. But we'll see. So Tora and Tam, I think, are both great. Like, I'm getting a kick out of both of them. I think they're both really good. And the voice acting, especially for Tam, I think is really good.
Yeah, I was going to bring her up in particular. Like, I like Tora. Right now, she just kind of seems like a foil for Kaz in a way. And
I think a potential romantic interest for him too.
Rival romantic interest. And I think like her design is really cool. I really like the way she looks. But I think Tam is like one of my like top 3 characters, like where I'm like, man, I really want to know like what is her deal. Because she's like the mechanic, like the person there who like actually wants to do a good job and like actually cares. And I don't know, I think she's interesting, and like the voice actress just like nails it. Like, it's so good.
100%. And I'm sure by the end of the season we'll know these voice actors. Sort of how we did like with Rebels. I could tell you the names of all the voice actors that played all those primary characters and sort of about them and stuff like that. But like right now, I don't know too many of them yet.
Too fresh. I've like read interviews and like see videos with them, but like I can't like, I'm not like, oh, that's Vanessa Marshall. Like,
Right. Yeah. So I think Tam will be a great character for sure. And I think it's interesting too. I feel like in the first couple episodes, they've sort of played up to a certain extent her relationship with Jaeger, and maybe like a little bit of jealousy or a little bit of feeling like, well, what has Kaz done to earn this place? And so, that should be interesting, because I think like she is obviously clearly much more qualified than Kaz as far as the mechanic stuff goes, and seems to be a little confused about why Jaeger is letting this like snot-nosed kid come in and, you know, goof around and goof up. That'll be interesting to see if they develop that a little further. So one of my favorites, Ryan, is Niku. I love Niku. Yeah. He's been really funny. The line about eating his pet was maybe just a little like slapsticky for me. Like that line was one where I was like, all right, I guess so. But everything else, I've really thought he was really interesting, and it's just a different kind of character. You know, there's always like, or there's frequently goofy, silly characters, comedic foils, or comedic characters, I guess, in these kinds of shows. But there's something about his portrayal, the way he's written, in the way he thinks differently, that I think is actually really cool. I think it's I don't know exactly how to phrase it, but I think it is pretty thoughtful to write the character the way they've written him, to sort of be representative of, you know, a different way of thinking and a different way of kind of interacting and socializing, but in a way that's really fun and likable. So I think he's hilarious, but I think he's also almost like when you read like a children's book, like a picture book or something, and there's certain characters in there that like they're kind of communicating empathy and an idea that we should, you know, sort of accept and respect people who come at life a little differently than we do, that sort of thing. That's the vibe I'm getting from Niku, but I'm also finding him really funny and entertaining.
Yeah. And he almost seems like a mixture between like C-3PO and Spock, and but there's also like, it's like those two characters plus like a ton of heart. And that's really, it is interesting. I feel like the humor is kind of like you were saying with like the pet thing. Like it is like consistently hit or miss. Like there'll be some times where like it's like an eye roll, or it's like I actually laugh out loud. There's like no real middle ground. I feel like with his character, like but I think generally it hits more than it misses.
I think so too, and I think that like I haven't watched that episode where he delivers that line about the cat or the pet, not cat. I don't think he said cat. I think he just said pet. But anyway, I haven't watched that line with my kids, but I have a feeling my kids would crack up at that. Like that might be that level of humor, that kind of joke where, you know, it's not really going to land so well with us, but with the target audience, it might. You know, what do you think about Jaeger?
He's interesting. Like he is your Obi-Wan Kenobi, your Kanan. Like he's seen some stuff. He doesn't really want to get back into the mix. He's just trying to make an honest living, but he's going to be back in the mix.
I really like him. And I feel like he's empathetic and kind to Kaz, which I really like so far. But there's just something in me that feels like he might be the one who Kaz is ultimately going to find out is like the First Order plant, or the one who's working with the First Order or something.
What?
I don't know why I feel that, but that's what I feel.
I don't get that vibe at all.
I don't get that way. I don't get that vibe from the way he acts, but there's just something about the show and the setup of the show and stuff like that. Like, I don't know. I'm feeling like he, just in the way he interacted with Poe and his reluctance kind of to take Kaz on, and his reluctance to get back to, I mean, I hope it's like, it's how they're presenting it, which is that like he got out of the fight a long time ago and he doesn't want to get back into the fight, but you know, eventually by the end, he'll get dragged back in and he'll he'll be invested again. But part of me wonders if there's a sort of guilt in what's happening there is actually like not just, well, I got out of this and I'm reluctant to get back into the fight, but if it's more like I'm working with the other side and I don't feel great about the fact that I'm working with the other side, but that's where some of that reluctance is coming from. And I think, to look at it through that Rian Johnson lens with The Last Jedi, like what would be the hardest thing for Kaz to face here on the Colossus? And this is a show for 7 and 8 year olds. Maybe they're not thinking that way at all. There's no reason they have to be, but if they are, I think finding out, at the end of this season or whenever that actually Jaeger is the one that he, is going to find out is working with the other side. That would be interesting. And if Jaeger had really complicated reasons for doing that, I think that would be really interesting too. I don't know that he's going to turn out to be like the stroking his chin, like evil bad guy necessarily. I think there's room for him to be working with the First Order on some level, reluctantly and with regret, we
saw that in the Poe comic.
In
a recent arc. I wonder if there will be, like, when the war comes home, so to speak, like, will there be, like, will everyone be on board to join the Resistance? Like, that's potentially interesting, especially with some of these characters that we haven't really seen yet.
If we look down at the next row, there's like Hype Phazon, who he was in the pilot. I don't know if he was in the next 2 episodes at all, was he?
No, I think they were just like, he's a great racer.
He had a line or two in the
pilot. He's the Sebulba of the Colossus.
I like Donald Faison though, so I bet that character will be one that's fun. But these next 3, Freya, Fenris, Griff Halloran, and Bo Keevil, did we see them at all in these first 3?
No, I think we may have seen maybe Freya was like on the board where it's like, who is Kaz going to face?
Okay.
Maybe she was there. I don't know.
We did see that purple alien that is one of the toys that was revealed last week. Like what's her name?
Oh, yeah.
Something with an S. She's a pirate. We did see her a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah, and like, I mean, all it really says about her in the database is like she's got like this cold demeanor. Like
Freya?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's pretty much it. But I think Griff Halloran is the one I want to talk about.
Yeah, your show note is pretty interesting here.
Okay, because Griff Halloran seems to be, he's like this dude in a tank top, and he's got like this really angry looking face, and he totally has like Empire insignia tats.
Yeah.
Which, when you think about that, like, that's another one of those things I was mentioning earlier. Like, what is like the context? How do the people on the ground feel about, living in a post-galactic Civil War era? And so, like, I was thinking about this, and it almost seems to me like, wouldn't having like Empire tattoos almost be like akin to like having like Confederate flag tattoos now?
Yeah, I mean, sort of, or akin to having them, 20 years after the Civil War. You know what I mean? Like, because well, we probably don't want to get into the politics of the Confederate flag necessarily. We don't like it, but having it now is like is maybe different than it would have been. I don't know. I guess I don't know enough about those politics, but like,
well, I think we can
to adopt a symbol like that 150 years later or more,
and to display it proudly. Like, he's like, maybe he got those tats when he was like in the service or whatever,
right?
But like, and now like they've got to have tattoo removal tech in Star Wars, I would assume.
Well, yeah,
you just go in a Bacta tank or something.
But the further removed you are from something like that, the more of a choice it is, I think, to adopt that symbolism and that ideology. Sure. Whereas if it's like you're in the mix and it's all around you and there's still some remnant of it, it's like, well, it's probably a messy process to divorce oneself from certain symbols and ideas. But all these years down the road, if you're choosing to value that thing, you're making that choice. It's not so messy. It's more like you just dove in head first. So anyways, I think the politics are a little more complicated when it's more recent. So like you're saying, like maybe he was an ex-Imperial and the symbols are still there. Maybe, because that's one of the things, like when this war is over with the Empire and the Rebellion, people who are on both sides are going to have to continue to live together, right? Unless just everyone who was on the side of the Empire gets straight up executed,
yeah,
there's going to be people.
Know is definitely not what happened,
right? Especially, Mon Mothma was like very forgiving, I think, right?
Yeah,
and plus, this is out on the outskirts of like charted space, so you figure sort of people who are more on the fringes of society would probably be out in that area too. So sorry, I kind of derailed you there, but
no, I think it's like fascinating. I think this is a weird character to like introduce in this like aimed for young kids show. Because this takes there's a lot of processing that like even as adults we're like walking through, and like
what do I think about this? How do I think it?
And I like that it says in the databank, no one is quite certain whether or not Griff is a veteran of the Imperial Navy or whether he just flies old Imperial colors to intimidate his opponents. So that like makes me think about like in like the late 80s, early to mid 90s, when a lot of like mainstream metal bands like Pantera and Slayer were adopting like Confederate flags in the case of Pantera, or like collecting Nazi paraphernalia and adopting those kind of like aesthetics and stuff in the case of Slayer, like just to be like tough. Like that's
shocking.
Yeah, like that's a really weird thing too. Like no matter how you like shake it, like this guy seems like really bad news and like extremely problematic as a human. In the Star Wars universe. Like he seems like potentially like the biggest like dickhead who's not like part of like the First Order that you could have. Like he's like, is he like a sympathizer? Is he like what is he doing? Like what's this guy's deal?
Well, and when you think about the target audience and stuff, like I feel like he's got a pretty bad look, and they're straight up like slapping the symbol of the bad guys like on him, you know what I mean? And I feel like it's probably a lot of the storytelling and stuff like that's going to be pretty broad or pretty straightforward. So I doubt he's like a real complex guy, and you know what I mean, like a tough nut to crack, like as far as the show goes. He's probably going to be just like a jerk, that's my guess. But but it certainly brings up some interesting issues and possibilities. So
because I mean, like the Empire like blew up Alderaan, like like that's a lot, like and that symbol kind of represents that. I don't know.
No, totally.
Like it's a very like I think it's a very interesting thing to like throw in to a show in 2018, because there's a lot of talk about like symbolism these days, and I think a lot of this stuff is appropriate in like the political climate and stuff. So like that's like a really interesting choice, and I really wonder where they're going to go with it. And I'm also like I'm visibly cringing right now, like thinking about like the ways it could be done wrong. And also like I'm surprised that it's there in this show of all places.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I bet he'll just be an ex-Imperial who's still mean, but lost and is still not cool and is still a villain, you know? I mean, not a villain in the sense that he's a criminal just for, you know, having associations or thoughts or whatever, but a villain in the sense that he's going to be like a bad dude. That'd be my guess. But we'll see. We'll see. How about Bo Keevil, this yellow, my gosh, how is that Jedi slipping my mind? Plo Koon.
Yes.
This yellow masked Plo Koon dude.
Yes.
I haven't actually read his description on the databank. Let's see if it says much about him.
He prefers to let the daredevil maneuvers of his lightning fast yellow racer do the talking for him. Like,
all right, cool.
Boom.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
All right. And I love, Ryan, I love these aliens too. There's 4 here listed. Gravel, Bolza, Gruel, Flix, and Orca. Flix and Orca are the ones that work in the sort of part shop or whatever. They're great.
Oh my god,
they're really
Flix.
Great designs.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, Gravel is really a standout to me. Like, he's very expressive and
yeah,
you know, he's been really entertaining, I think, too.
He's kind of annoying, but
what? I loved him.
He's annoying. I don't like him. I mean, I like him, but I don't like him.
Oh my god, I loved him. He was like one of my favorite parts of the show.
Yeah.
Him and Aunt Z. I really like Aunt Z as well.
Aunt Z's great. So okay, so Aunt Z is oh my god, why is his name slipping my mind?
Unkar Plutt.
Yes, Unkar Plutt from the junk dealer at is it Nema Outpost? Is that okay?
Nema Outpost, yeah.
So like Aunt Z is cut from that species cloth, right?
Like, if you mean that in the sense that she is that species, yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Like, she's not sort of like that species or similar to that species.
Sure,
I think she just is that species. Yeah.
She's not that Unkar Plutt archetype. No, she's like that species. Yeah.
Yeah.
What is that species?
Not sure. Don't know.
Okay.
Not sure.
But I think Star Wars is interesting because it assigns a lot of the same type of character traits to entire species. When it gets into the aliens, I think like we have like our good aliens, like the Mon Calamari, and you know they become like natural leaders, and then we have like the bad aliens, like the Rhodians, who are like shifty and stuff. But with whatever species Unkar Plutt and Aunt Z are, like, I mean, I guess it's maybe like an entrepreneurial would be the character trait, but like she doesn't seem like as shady as Unkar Plutt.
Yeah, no, totally. She seems great, actually.
Yeah.
I don't think she seems shady at all, really. So, yeah, no, I think that maybe it's just a case of like, that was a great design, Unkar Plutt, and an interesting design. And they were like, well, it's the sequel era. We saw an Unkar Plutt, or we saw Unkar Plutt in the sequel. So let's just make a female Unkar Plutt. You know, I don't know. Yeah. I think it might be as simple as that.
Let's yaddle her up.
Yeah. I'm thinking maybe it's just that simple, but I I've really liked her. I mean, she's sort of like an obese Maz Kanata, you know what I mean? Like, she runs this. Actually, she might be just ideal weight for her species.
That's
I'm not
true.
Sure.
Yeah, like can we get her BMI here?
She's great. I really like her.
Yeah,
and I like the fact that even though it's this like aircraft carrier on an ocean planet, like you said. It still manages to have a cantina of sorts, and that feels very Star Wars. So
yeah.
Cool. Well, we've talked about most of the points on here. I think we should probably close up on potential. I had tone on here in our show notes, but I feel like we've kind of like been talking about that throughout, right?
It's pretty light so far.
Yeah. And we really didn't get into kind of the plot points and like a synopsis of the episodes at all. So I think we were right to say that viewers or listeners could check this out and not feel like we were going to spoil too much. So that's good. But as sort of our last point of discussion tonight, we should talk about the potential of the show and where we think it could go. And we've done that in terms of plot, but I think one big thing for me, like one huge a thing that's exciting for me in terms of potential for the show is the idea that there's a lot of sequel era characters that could make their way into the show in one way or another. You mentioned Rey. That would be cool. If it crosses over with The Force Awakens, I think that's certainly possible. Although The Force Awakens took place over a pretty short amount of time, so maybe not her, but it could. So she would be interesting. Who else would you want to see as far as character, cameos and crossovers?
I mean, like the potential is pretty much endless because we have just gotten the most, like, which is ridiculous to say, like over like 2 films of a movie trilogy, like that are like it adds up to like over 5 hours of film. Like we still have only like really, from what we're used to as Star Wars fans, we've really barely scratched the surface of the sequel era and the characters and locations. Like, I mean, right now, like there's no indication, official indication that the show is going to move beyond the Colossus. We know that Kaz is looking for someone who might be working with the First Order, and that's like really as far as the limits of the show stretch from what we've been told so far. And they're like, and Lucasfilm has been pretty they've been playing their cards close to their chest with this one, and they've not been over promising anything. Like they're like, this is what this show is as of right now, and it could be just that. And it could be like Kaz his quest to become the best racer on the Colossus. Like that's possible. And like I said before, like I would be okay with that. But if we're going to like, move beyond that, like what happens when, the Resistance comes in and potentially destroys the Colossus?
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say in either Triple Dark or Fuel for Fire, I can't remember which are the second and third episodes. I mean, we get like Captain Phasma stepping out of the shadows and revealing that she's kind of orchestrating stuff with the pirates or whatever. And so that's like a reveal of a character that we knew was going to be in the show. But I think that could escalate, at this point, the setting has been the Colossus for all of these episodes. And I think will continue to be the setting basically for probably all of the first season or most of it. But we still had a character reveal of a big time villain from the First Order, because it does cut to, Starkiller Base and stuff like that. So I think Kylo Ren is a possibility. I think Snoke is actually a possibility. And maybe not super likely. And I don't know that they need to bring Snoke or even Kylo Ren in, but I think they could, and I think that could be really interesting, especially if the show does pick up a little bit in terms of what it's trying to, the scope of what it's trying to do. I think those are possibilities for sure. Finn, maybe a possibility, especially when getting closer to The Force Awakens. Although I don't really want to see like this crew of characters crossing over or interacting with, Rey and Finn and stuff like that pre Force Awakens, or like even during Force Awakens, because I don't think that makes any sense. I mean, Finn left the First Order and was with Poe and was with Rey and Han, and like there was no, I don't see how that would really happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I don't want the show to become kind of what Rebels sort of did, where it's like just who's going to be the big guest star that you love from the movies this episode, like in seasons like 2 and 3 and 4, where like it kind of, I mean, it was still centered around the main characters, but I feel like that was like missed opportunities to spend that time developing them instead of further developing like Leia or Lando or any like of the other like guest star characters. So yeah, I hope it doesn't become that. I think what excites me more than the potential to like bump into these other characters is locations. Like I feel like if they do leave the Colossus, like I want to see them on Canto Bight.
That would be awesome.
Like I want somehow like that. Like, man, if you see a preview for a Resistance episode that's like Nico on Canto Bight, or Niku on Canto Bight, like, man, like the potential there is amazing. There's also like, I do feel like we've gotten more, but I think there's no argument that Phasma was underutilized across the first 2 films in the well, there's some argument in
I would argue she was not underutilized, but
she was utilized to a small degree. So, and some people feel like, there's more to that, to her story, in that she played her role in those films, which is fine. I guess I phrased that wrong, but like there's more to tell is what I should say.
Yeah.
And I think like telling more there, but I mean, there's so many, like getting Maz in there, Paige and Rose.
Paige and Rose are a huge possibility, I think, and really would be really great.
Yeah, I mean, even
we have no idea what they were doing or where they were during The Force Awakens. Really, I mean, well, I guess we do from reading the journal. But it was like with the Resistance, and it would present no problem for Kaz or other characters from the show to cross paths with them at some point. So
yeah, I mean, and like characters from like Maz's castle playing in there, like, I mean, maybe Jakku is like it's it's like a dump in a nowhere planet, whatever, but there's also like huge threads of the sequel trilogy and the Rise of the First Order that take place there, with all those like buried underground bunkers full of like weaponry and everything else, and the Battle of Jakku and all of this. Like, I mean, maybe it ends up there. Maybe we get to see our first glimpse of on-screen Constable Zuvio.
Yeah, possibly.
Like,
yeah.
This is like, that's what's cool about the animation, like, and what they could do with it. Like, yeah, I don't really like, I would like to see some of the, just the locations and some of like the more minor characters in here, as opposed to like we need to get people to watch. So here's a, here's a Poe episode, here's a Kylo episode, like, which is fine. Like, that stuff's cool and I will enjoy it. But like, I think it would be cool to get a little bit of like the stuff that we just got, like these tantalizing glimpses of, and want more.
Yeah. No.
Galaxy's Edge, Batu.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I think that's going to happen for sure.
Yeah.
Some eagle-eyed Star Wars fans already recognized in like a hollow vid or a hollow photo. I think it might even have been Jaeger's family from the Fuel for the Fire episode.
Okay.
But one of those images, like that, they compared, some fans like compared to concept art of Batu from Galaxy's Edge, and it's exactly the same. Like the spires and everything.
Wow.
It's yep. So that's already definitely in there. So
yeah,
I mean, in a very small way, but it's telling of the fact that that'll likely show up in some capacity.
Yeah.
So, I'm cool. with you. I'm with you. I'm more excited for just expanding our understanding of and our exposure to the galaxy during the sequel era. Like, that's more exciting to me than just like, oh well, let's bring in every big character from the sequel trilogy, because I don't see how Luke could factor in. I don't see how Han could factor in. He's out smuggling. Luke's on Octo. Rey's on Jakku, Finn's with the First Order. I mean, it's not like they couldn't do it with most of those characters, but I feel like it would be a stretch and it's unnecessary.
And that's one of those things that like bum me out about Rebels a lot of times. And even Clone Wars is like, wow, this is a stretch.
Yeah. No, like I sounds like we're definitely in agreement about Rebels. Yeah. It was best when it was focused on Lothal, focused on those 5 people that were part of the Ghost, and not trying to bring back Darth Maul and bring back Ahsoka and bring back clones and bring back all these different things. I liked a lot of that stuff. Cool. What's that?
The Ahsoka stuff was pretty cool.
The Ahsoka stuff is pretty cool. I mean, I have issues with certain elements of it, but yeah, it is pretty cool. Yeah. And like, I actually liked all of it except for Darth Maul. I liked all of it, but I didn't like it as much as when it was just like following Ezra and Kanan and the Ghost crew on Lothal. I mean, that's what I like the most, Yeah. So, but anyway, yeah, I think if it remains, if the show remains, essentially what it is right now, after 3 episodes, I think it will be a lot of fun. And I think it will be, I'll feel like I want to watch every week. I won't feel, like you said, like, oh my God, I've got to race to the TV. And I'm afraid if I get on Twitter, people are going to spoil what happened.
Like, I'm not checking my phone until.
Yeah, it won't be like that. It'll be more like, hey, I have 20 minutes I can spend in the Star Wars universe, and it's going to be colorful and it's going to be fun, and I can watch it with my kids. And, it's just going to be like a joyful experience, but it will be a, probably lighter, more kind of like low stakes experience, and that's okay. Like, I like that. I think it does have the potential though to kind of really be an opportunity to explore the sequel era in a way that we don't get to in the movies, and I think that could also be really cool. So I hope that I think my hope for the show, especially based on what we've said about Rebels and stuff, my hope for the show is that it knows what it is and wants to be, and it remains true to that instead of, trying to go in too many different directions, which I think the animation department has, kind of ended up doing in the past. So we'll see, but overall, I really, really like it so far, and I'm definitely excited to keep watching it. It's nice to have the promise of a new Star Wars TV show every week again, and it hasn't even been that long since Rebels ended, but it's nice to know, like, oh well, I have a new 22 minutes of Star Wars to watch this week.
Yeah, and I think like the end of Rebels kind of like the hype and the excitement like just gradually deflated for both of us. Like, I mean, I just kind of stopped watching at a point, even though I was still like super hardcore into Star Wars and like reading the comics and consuming the books. Like Rebels just got moved to like the very bottom of the stack after a certain point. But like this does have me like excited again for like weekly Star Wars.
Yeah.
And that's cool, especially in the absence of like a film this winter. This will be nice.
This will be cool. And we get a toy line. That toy line's gonna be really cool.
I'm so excited about those toys. I
don't know that we're getting a video game, Ryan, but I absolutely 100% agree with you that it is so ripe for a video game. Like this is more perfect for a video game than any Star Wars movie or TV show or whatever in the last 10 or 15 years.
Give us a racing game. Like that's it. Like make it F-Zero cross Star Fox. Like,
well, I think it could be, or they could even do like a racing / space battle game, depending on where the show goes.
Yeah.
Because we've already had space battles. Like, well, we had the pirate attack. It's not quite a space battle, but I feel like, they could go beyond just flat racing. Although I could definitely handle that too. Especially like how incredible would it be if they put out like a $20, racing, like through rings, like small downloadable type of game for, modern consoles. Like how great would that be? Like it doesn't need to be a full on $60 physical release. Like I would kill for, just a less ambitious, just super like narrowly focused 10 levels of racing through rings with online multiplayer. And
Sonic and All Stars Racing Transformed.
Yeah, but basically. Resistance. Yes, exactly.
Yep. That was a $40 game that just
that could be like we could talk about that in hushed tones when we talk about the very best Star Wars video games, like Super Star Wars, Shadows of the Empire, Star Wars Racer, Rogue Squadron, and Resistance. Like those could be like the best Star Wars games,
Yeah.
Man.
I don't think anyone else would agree with that list you just threw out there except like me.
Okay. All right. Well, if you agree, I mean,
I'm pretty on board for all those. Yeah.
Yeah. I love those games. So,
yeah, totally. Totally. I hope this, like, it's not really like, I'm not seeing any like merchandise or anything. Like it doesn't have like a big merch push right now. Like you can't buy anything Star Wars Resistance right now. No,
I think the only thing I've seen are some young reader books maybe. And I don't know that they're on shelves yet, but like, the DK, like I can read level 1, I can read level 2, those books.
Okay. Yeah.
I think there's some of those. I don't know if they're out or they're coming out, but yeah, those are happening. But you're right, because I think even when Rebels launched, there was like lunch boxes and like some
birthday party supplies. That's how you know is when you go in the birthday party supplies aisle and you see this stuff.
There's a visual guide that came out during the first season. So, but I don't know that all that stuff was available on launch necessarily.
Yeah.
So it could be that stuff is coming, but
I remember getting the visual dictionary. Like I definitely seen the show. Yeah. By the time I bought that.
There's 2 of those and I only have the first one. I need to get the second one. There's one that came out later, like maybe season 2 or 3. So,
okay.
Yeah. You know what? Last thing I have to say about Resistance before we wrap up here is there's a blue snaggletooth. That was awesome. I don't know if you caught that or not, but the blue
you
probably caught it because he was one of the 2 aliens. What episode was that? Triple Dark or Fuel for the Fire? That like there was a point where Kaz was like hiding behind like a container, like listening.
Mm-hmm.
There was a blue snaggle. Anyway, look for it next time. There's a blue snaggletooth who's pretty cool. So yeah. I feel like there's going to be a lot of little. Actually, you sent me an article. You sent me a link to an article about some of the little references and things.
Yeah,
I feel like there's going to be a lot of that sort of thing. And the aliens are on point. A lot of really cool looking aliens and pretty. pretty varied group of aliens in the show, which has been a complaint for some people about the sequel trilogy in the Disney era. Is like, well, we only get like kind of the same, set of aliens, and there's a lot of aliens that we really love that we're not seeing in this new era, that kind of thing. And there's definitely, I think, like a nice variety of aliens so far in the show.
Yeah. Also the pod racer announcer.
Yeah.
Reprising his role as a race announcer in Star Wars. Very cool.
Did we see him? I don't think we saw him, right? We just heard him.
Yeah, I can't picture.
I don't think we saw him. I hope we do see that character at some point. But yeah, that was great to hear.
Yeah, for sure.
For sure. Cool. Okay. Well, I think I'm about ready to wrap up our discussion of the first 3 episodes. If you are, Ryan.
Yeah, we did not talk about anything that happens in these episodes at all.
Really
There's like this whole like plot about like the kids sneaking in to steal, and
I do want to say I hate that kid. I hate that kid. I so hate that kid.
That guy so sucked.
He's the worst.
And like the rivalry between like the Aces and whatever, I don't know. And like the Aces are like a racing team, but they also defend the Colossus. Like the pirates, like there's all this stuff that happened that like
it's true. We didn't talk about any of it.
It does feel kind of like inconsequential, like in the bigger picture, and I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it is light. It's light fare for sure, but at the same time, it's like I kind of feel like if you want to know what happened, watch the episodes. If you want to know what we think, you probably don't. But if you want to know what you think, then that's what like we'll give you our impressions and our feelings on it, and try to analyze it a little bit. But I don't really want to summarize it so much. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
And you know what I feel like too. I think we'll be fine to sort of just spend 15 minutes a week, if we're recording weekly or whatever, like talking about, each new episode or something. I don't know that we need to do like separate shows about most of these episodes probably. So it was nice to do this one as our first episode, kind of talking about the show after it's come out to focus entirely on these episodes. But, I'm just getting the impression that, we can talk about the new episodes as they come out for a few minutes, but they probably won't necessitate deep dive discussions every week,
Yeah, unless like some major repercussions go down. I mean, I guess it's kind of like how we handle the comics and stuff. Like, I mean, we're reading those on like a weekly, bi-weekly basis, like monthly basis.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, there's not like, I don't know what I would really have to say about any of them, like most of the time, until like when runs are done and when stories are done, like I have like opinions, like, I have opinions on the Poe Dameron series and on the original Darth Vader series. But like, as it's like happening, it's just kind of like, okay, we're just moving this story along and we'll see what happens.
Well, the thing is, we haven't added that level to our Patreon yet to support that new show where we go over all the comics. So, yeah.
I mean, I do it like,
for free. I do it for free.
Yeah,
not for some. Yeah.
But it's just a matter of like blocking out the time and actually like having the time to be caught up. Like,
yeah, and the way we've done this show for these 78 episodes anyways is to kind of just like whatever week we're recording, just sort of say, well, what do we want to
what do we feel like?
Yeah, like what's the big issue? I feel like most of our shows are pretty much focused on a single topic, maybe 2 topics, but we don't usually do the hey, let's cover everything kind of vibe, so which we could, but it's not necessarily where we want to take it. And there's a lot of shows that do a really good job of that. So for right now,
shows I kind of like their own niches.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I mean, yeah, if you want comics discussion, listen to Comics with Kenobi and Jedi Journals.
I was gonna say, Jedi Journals does a lot with the comics and stuff.
To those too, shows.
So, yep.
But
and I like a show called The Bad Motivators, and those guys break down not like all the comics, but they'll they'll dig into specific comics pretty hardcore. So there's lots of shows out there for sure that do that kind of stuff. So in any case, I think we're about ready to wrap this one up. So we won't be able to watch a new episode of Resistance for a couple weeks now, because
that's like such a weird bummer. Like,
yeah,
I think I'm going to rewatch. I do want to rewatch the first 3 episodes again. Also because the Disney Now app kind of sucks, and I had like really low video quality.
So
on those episodes,
I think part of the issue, Ryan, is that your internet also maybe kind of sucks, because you told me that it kept dropping quality and stuff for you. I had some issues authenticating, and that was kind of really because of Comcast, and also because of the fact that I'm kind of doing this in like a slightly less legit way, in the sense that I'm using I'm like using a family member's Comcast login, because I have Comcast internet, but I don't have Comcast TV channels.
Okay.
But I have a family member, like a parent, that has Comcast TV channels, so I use their login. But Comcast, to their credit, is smart enough to be like, the IP address you're using is a Comcast like subscriber IP address or whatever, but you don't have those channels at that IP address. And I'm like, well, yeah, but I'm logging into somebody else. And they're like, yeah, well, guess what? So I had to get on a different, I had to leave my house, which I was going to do anyways, but when I was somewhere else on a different Wi-Fi, I could use those credentials to log into the app. And then when I came home, it was like, well, you're already logged in. So it didn't check again. It probably checks every couple weeks or something like that. So anyways, it's complicated, but, and that's not the Disney Now app's fault. It's opens up the Comcast browser or whatever. It's totally Comcast that did that, not Disney Now.
Okay.
But anyway, when I've been logged in, it streams high quality, no problem, no drops for me or whatever. So I think it's
I don't know.
Mile high internet of yours,
No,
the air's too thin up there or something. I'm not sure.
I watched WWE Network, and that's fine.
Well, the network, yeah. I mean, that's highest quality right there.
We watched Netflix, and we watched your Hulu account, and we
nice. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. Fair enough. Yeah.
I've been watching DC Universe.
Okay. So your other streaming apps, you don't really have.
Everything else works fine.
I'll tell you what. I'll tell listeners, I guess. I doubt the deal is still live. I'm almost positive it's not, but I was able to jump on an Amazon Prime Video deal to get season 1 of Resistance for $2.99.
That's crazy.
So
because I'm pretty sure it's $2.99 an episode.
It is $2.99 an episode, but for some reason, on Monday or Tuesday of this week, they had the whole season, and I did that with DuckTales also. But DuckTales, they broke the first season of DuckTales up into 2 series or seasons or whatever you want to call it. So maybe that'll be the same thing with Resistance here. It's if DuckTales first season was 24 episodes, I got the second 12 for $2.99. But it's great because every time a new episode airs, you get an email from Amazon being like, okay, you have a new download available. And so I have the whole second half of the first season of DuckTales on my Amazon Prime account as well. And I can go watch those whenever. And it'll be the same thing with Resistance. So it's just that when they first started the show out here, they put up 3 episodes all at once. But once we get caught up now, every week they will be up on iTunes and Amazon and Google Play and all that stuff. So, for listeners or viewers who don't have a cable subscription or, a way to watch it on the Disney Now app, you can buy it that way too. But keep an eye out because that deal was really great. And, it'll be nice just to have them there if I want to watch them that way. And with Amazon, you can download them too. So if you're, going to be leaving the house and you want to watch them, on a bus or a train or, somewhere where you don't have Wi-Fi, you can actually download them and watch them, without internet. So it's pretty cool.
That is really nice.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to just watching the show on just on my DVR. Which records from Disney XD, which is the way we watched Rebels, was just on DVR, and then when it airs, probably just watch it then.
Sure.
So I don't think the Disney app will be an issue going forward. So it's fine. but I didn't have a great first experience with it.
Yeah, no, I had some trouble too, for sure. So, all right. Well, with that, we will truly wrap up. So, if you want to check out more episodes of our show, of course, you can subscribe on iTunes or on YouTube. But everything is also posted at blockaderunnerpodcast.com. We'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts on Resistance or feedback on the show at blockaderunnerpodcast@gmail.com. Our show is on Twitter at Blockade Run. Ryan, you're on Twitter at
Brawn Dwarf, BRAWNDWARF.
And we're a couple other places too, which you can find at that blog or website, which is blockaderunnerpodcast.com. Also, if you are enjoying our show, we would love if you would leave a review on iTunes or whatever service you use to listen to the show. That would be very helpful. So if you're listening and enjoying, consider going out and leaving us a review. That would be great. But with that being said, until next time, we'll be back very soon. And thanks very much for listening.